Welcome, everybody. Our director, Kippy, is going to do an interview with our new onboarded Vista, Cooper. And after that, we will be talking about stigmas around homelessness.
The material and information presented here is provided by lived experience youth and for general information purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are of the guests of our podcast own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Youth Move.
Great. So one of the exciting things about Youth Move Colorado is we're always getting new leaders and Vista members who join our core. And I want to spend a little bit of time introducing you to our newest member. And Cooper, I think you have a really interesting story and reason you're here. So Cooper, do you want to tell us a little bit about why you decided to come to Colorado and join us in this work we're doing?
So I grew up in a very privileged background, let's say, more privileged than most, in California. And I lived a great childhood, and I want others to have that opportunity for themselves. And that's exactly why I've joined Vista Work. Now, how exactly I got into this role, it's quite complicated, but I did during the pandemic fall in love with the idea of trying to make the lives of others better as a career path for myself. And it took a couple of summers for me to realize that capacity building was the way for me to go. And my most recent experience was at a nonprofit in Oregon called Oregon Ask, which stands for Oregon After School and Summer for Kids. And that experience taught me about the importance of being able to connect with others and engage several stakeholders to make the lives of the underserved better. And that Vista work catapulted me into this newest Vista role that I have with Project Aware within the Colorado Department of Education. And basically, Project Aware, the goal of Project Aware, I should say, it's to build a comprehensive school-based mental health services system and to support communities and schools to increase access to these mental health services.
Cooper, you were talking about what Project Aware is. I don't know that many people know what that is. Do you want to share what Project Aware is and what they do?
Yes, so Project Aware, which stands for Advancing Wellness and Resiliency in Education, it aims to build a very comprehensive network of school-based mental health services within the state of Colorado. And how Project Aware does this is by increasing collaboration between stakeholders, whether that be state governments, local agencies, schools. Basically, Project Aware's job is to bring these stakeholders together to improve policies and systems, strengthen resources, et cetera, for the purpose of addressing and developing solutions for those youth, especially at the middle and high school levels, for those youth experiencing mental health issues.
You know, Cooper, I'm going to ask you a question because you said something. So with your comfort and with your permission, I'd love for your thoughts on this. So you talked about that you had a really privileged upbringing and, we're a lived experience core. And I'd love for you to talk about your understanding or awareness around how mental health, can happen to anybody, right? And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what your opinion of or your experience of is understanding that regardless of whether you have grown up in privilege or you have been in foster care, that behavioral health is something that doesn't discriminate on upbringing. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you think about that statement?
Well, I think that anybody can be affected by some kind of traumatic event that messes with your brain. And I'm not going to say that I'm particularly traumatized right now, but there have definitely been some events that have spooked me for some time. For example, during the pandemic, it was quite fearful for me to leave the house. My parents can definitely describe my fears of leaving the house during the pandemic. But the point that I'm trying to make is that these kind of events can happen to anyone. And what might be even scarier, it's not that these kind of events can happen to anyone, but when I've been doing some mental health trainings for my onboarding at Project Aware, one of the things that I learned is that it's very, very difficult for mental health professionals to diagnose the causes of your struggles. And it often takes the engagement, as I previously mentioned, of several different stakeholders to talk about, a here's what I know about this person, and here's what I believe might be affecting him or her. It takes more than just one person.
Well, and I'll help you a little bit here because I think you're making a really interesting point is that, you know, this advice, I wonder what advice you would give to a young person, right? Because for a young person, we know there's a lot of stigma about concerns about mental health. And there's also this real fear about who do you ask or where do you go or how can people figure out, help a young adult figure out what help they might need and where to get that. And do you have any insight on what you've learned related to that? Like, because, right? That's kind of what Project Aware is in the business of. So what
Yes.
kind of advice or ideas do you have that could help with that stigma of a young person finding or reaching out to people to help them out?
Well, perhaps for those people that are dealing with particularly complex mental health issues, seeing if they qualify for high fidelity wraparound services. That's one of the things that I learned could potentially help. The problem, one of the things that I know is that when we're mapping these resources of mental health resources within communities, there are definitely a lot of deficits that need to be addressed. So what I was saying about high fidelity wraparound is that may definitely I definitely would check to see if you qualify for high fidelity wraparound services. And what's so special about those services is that they engage several stakeholders. For example, it could be a mental health counselor, it could be a teacher or a teacher's assistant. It could be your special education assistant. It engages many stakeholders to talk about your issues.
And so here's
Yeah.
my next question. And so this question is, as you talk about young people and the fear you had of leaving your house when during the pandemic and this loneliness. And we know, like, if you look at the data, and you and I looked at this data, right, from the Healthy Kids Colorado, that I think over 39% of Colorado students reported feeling lonely or isolated in the last year. And what advice would you give to first to young people who are feeling that? Like, what's something that helped you out when you were dealing with this fear of going out and this fear about and the experience of loneliness? So that's the first question. What advice would you give to a young person? And then the second question is what advice would you give to people working with young people to ask them or help a young person who's feeling this loneliness and isolation?
I'd say that one of the things that helped me the most during the pandemic was trying new activities. And for me, for example, it got quite bad at one point when I was pretty scared to leave my room. But the problem is being in a room alone. It's not exactly a place that invites positive emotions, at least from my perspective. Now, other people may feel safe in their room, but at the same time, being in your own room, depending on your comfort level, it may not necessarily be the place for you. And it wasn't the place for me. So what I tried to do was participating in new activities. So for me, it was just walking around in the park from time to time, which I
Hmm.
did not previously do.
Did you do anything with like technology to be connected or game or anything? I heard that was a really popular thing for young people during the pandemic.
I mean, I've gotten too old for gaming.
That
I
I'd
yeah,
like you to say that because, so for you to say that is, we've heard a lot about,
yeah,
oh, gaming is good for me. So you saying I went on walks,
yeah,
I read books, that's really good because we want to make
yeah.
sure
I did
to all
yeah.
need to.
So, another thing that I did was read some books that interested me, going online and playing some games, and there's definitely a negative stigma surrounding video games, but for me personally, I tried working on some mind games because I really liked exercising the brain, and it helped me cope during those tough times, and I'm pretty sure for a lot of the people listening to this recording, they had their ways of getting through the pandemic as well.
Yeah. So now we're supposedly the pandemic's over, but we know that that's not true. We have lasting effects. What would you tell somebody who is either a parent or a teacher or somebody working in a program that they could do to help a young person that still is trying to find their footing after the pandemic?
I really like to think in terms of being interconnected with other people when it comes to, for example, trying to help others during some very difficult times. I think that one of the best things that you can do for a person is help them meet other people, whether that be in some kind of club, whether that be in a community group where you have some rather common interests. I just think that having someone to talk with is just about the best thing you could do for someone that might be struggling when it comes to their mental health. And just, for them to be able to open up about their experiences, I think that it would relieve their tension if you are willing to listen.
Well, Cooper, it's so exciting that you joined our team. Listeners to our podcast, you're going to get a chance to hear Cooper in future episodes, but we wanted to have you get a chance to learn about him and kind of understand how he is connecting to Youth Move Colorado and the future work of our podcast.
Okay, so now we are going to dive into the youth homelessness stigmas for Homeless Youth Awareness Month. We will be asking some questions from Savannah from her presentation that she did for the YHDP summit meeting that we were in. So the first question that I want to ask you is what are some common misconceptions about homeless youth and why do these stigmas persist?
Thank you, Soraya. I feel like this is just me and what I've been through in society that everybody thinks like if you're a youth, over 18, you should just be able to get a job and do all this great stuff all out the gate when you're 18. And it's not, there's a lot of people that say that they choose to be homeless and they choose to be, like addicts, that that word is terrible. And then that they're lazy, that's another stigma, or that, they just want to do this. It's because that either when they turned 18 or when they like left their home to be out on their own, they had no real guidance. They had like no real support anywhere. And some of it is situational, where you either get kicked out of your house because you're not accepted. Like there's a whole list of reasons why some homeless youth would be homeless. It's not a choice. It's not, it's something that they want to do. It's something that they have to do because there's no other choice. And I think why these stigmas still stay around, it's kind of like generational learning habits from society where we have to shame people into why they're doing this and what, how they got there
Yeah, I'd
to their
like
house.
to go back to that point of this perception that homeless people are lazy and homeless people are making the choice to be homeless. Well, the fact of the matter is they don't necessarily choose how much they get paid. For example, about half of Americans today live paycheck to paycheck and struggle to meet their financial obligations. And with rent rising much faster than wages, it's quite difficult to meet said obligations, including perhaps the most important one, which is having a permanent place to live. So the idea that they're lazy, it's like, why don't you get angrier at managers for being too lazy to pay people enough to live healthily? So the funny thing is, even with all of these sweeps taking place, criminalizing homelessness, you would think, well, wait a minute. What if we do go so far as to criminalize homelessness, then wouldn't we have better laws or policies that keep people in their homes? Well, believe it or not, the answer to that is actually no. And perhaps the epitome of this is going back when the pandemic was starting to subside somewhat, you had eviction moratoriums ending, and then you also had unemployment benefits related to COVID-19 ending on, ironically, Labor Day. I remember this story, unemployment benefits ending on Labor Day in 2021, which was quite possibly the cruelest twist of fate. And so policies like those would definitely cause more people to get evicted and thus thrown out on the streets. Yet when they're out on the streets, they are subject to sweeps and encampment bans. And so I have to ask, it's like, so which is it? You're making it so easy to get thrown out of your homes, but when you're thrown out of your homes, you're trying to push them back into home. Is that the best way of putting it? No. But do you kind of get what I'm saying? It's like, society contradicts itself when they have policy, when they cut safety nets and enable people to be evicted so easily. Yet when they're evicted and on the streets, we have a tendency to push them around and say, get back in your homes. Yeah, it doesn't make
Yeah,
sense to me.
yeah, it really doesn't. I feel like the pandemic really messed everybody up, in every situation, housed or not. It was just a really chaotic time for like people going to work, people that didn't have work in the first place. I wasn't working, so I didn't know what was happening. It was like maybe I just got housing and the world is ending now. Cool. That's how it was for me. I wasn't really pushed in or out anywhere, but I had friends that were being pushed in and out of like COVID quarantine places and like shelters. And then I remember like Las Vegas doing like the parking lot quarantine where they were putting people in a parking space and then having another empty parking space beside them. And then with another person for quarantine in tents. And I remember like just looking back on the news and stuff, and I'm just like, why is it like this? Why are we doing this to people? And then there was some other areas that were renting out hotel rooms for people who are experiencing homelessness for them to have a safe place to go during quarantine times. And I just couldn't imagine being out there in those times and having to deal with so much movement and then so much stagnant at the same time where you have to be in, a 10 by 10 type of area or a 10 by 8 type of area and can't even go anywhere, but then have like strangers serving you food and serving you like things that are like sterilized and stuff. It was very weird to me how we handled the COVID-19 things with people in transitional living places because that's where I was. We were really quarantined to our own little studio apartment. We couldn't interact with people unless we already interacted with them. And it really declined everyone in a state of like being panic and fearing for each other, like fearing that, oh, if I touch you, I'm going to get COVID and then be in the hospital and pass away. It was very scary.
Also, kind of bouncing off of Cooper, which I absolutely agree with this situation at hand. A lot of us are still living with our parents, and it's I would never ever say that it is homelessness, because we're in a home. But also the same breath, we're in the ages of 18 trying to get out of the house, we're in that well, we're in that kinda young adult age where do I stay with my parents? Do I deal with their rules that I absolutely despise? Or do I live in my car the entire time? Or do I just stay homeless because it's just like nothing is going right and none of the situations are properly being placed. So when everybody has to kind of go off with the situation of what is my choices, then it's not really a choice for them to make because it automatically has been brought to, which frustrates me because it's like, why is it that you have such judgment on these children when this is what they had to do? They had to make an adult decision to navigate life.
I want to talk also about the idea that homeless people aren't looking for jobs. That is an absolute lie that they are not looking for jobs at all. What's really lacking is good jobs that pay enough. And not only that, but in this day and age, it is exceptionally difficult to find work. Applying for a job has never been more difficult, where managers are using AI to find their candidates. And in pools of thousands of applicants, it's very difficult. The odds are against you for you to even land an interview in the first place. And not only that, but crafting together an application, it takes an exceptional amount of time. I find job hunting sometimes to be very Sisyphean because you work so hard to get your application in order only for the rock to roll down the hill again because you got rejected. And so you have to start rolling up the hill all over again and start working on your application once again. That can be incredibly demoralizing. And that's not even mentioning the fact that, as I previously mentioned, that so many jobs do not pay sufficient money to meet these obligations, such as rent, food, and gas, and medical bills and insurance premiums. Oh God, the insurance premiums, disgusting. So you're basically asking these people that are seeking jobs to just settle for less. I don't think you shouldn't have to settle for less than what is necessary.
Yeah, and, like, on top of all that, there's so many requirements. What if you don't have your ID? What if you don't have 2 forms of ID? You gotta have a whole process just to do that, and then you gotta look a certain way at the interview. If you're homeless, you don't have a shower, you don't have laundry facilities to go to, how are you even going to look presentable to even get a job in the first place? So it's a whole vicious cycle of not having a place, not having an address to get the important documents if you don't have them. And then even if you have all that, then you have to look presentable. How are you going to look presentable if there's not a drop-in center, if there's not somewhere to go for you to even get resources like that?
And systemically speaking, the system that we have today, it works against those that are either homeless, on the brink of homelessness, or just struggling in general. Because financially, they may not necessarily be able to afford the best education or the access to job training resources or even know how to speak during an interview. Those people may not necessarily have the access to the people that can help you get a job or the education that could help you get your not only a job but a sustainable career as well. And so like you said, Savannah, it's a rather vicious cycle where those that are currently experiencing homelessness, and I've learned try to say people experiencing homelessness people that rather than homeless people, because people experiencing homelessness implies that it is circumstance that has led them to experience homeless rather than, oh, it's just them, it's their problem. So let's try to say people experiencing homelessness. Anyways, systemically speaking, those that are experiencing homelessness or close to it just don't have the means of being able to basically progress to out of that state.
I honestly enjoy the way that you guys are having this conversation. And what I got from it was that it's very criminalizing the homeless youth and stuff like that, or anybody that's homeless. So in what ways are society has like criminalized homelessness, and what kind of impact does it have on young people living on the streets? Because from how I see it, it's very demeaning and very disrespectful that you would like criminalize them automatically without even getting to know them, like a prejudgment. How would you navigate that situation, Savannah?
If we're talking about like the society as a whole, like law enforcement and stuff like that, criminalizing people that are experiencing homelessness, I would say it's awful as one person of society to look in and see that our government is doing this camping ban. Like right now in Boulder, there's a camping ban going on. And I thought there was like no camping ban. It's just there's this push and pull all the time. It seems like every year they change this ban. And I've never seen a vote. I've never seen a law about it. I've never seen anything like a council city type thing to hold a discussion with the public. I would want to see something like that. But it's like, sadly, we don't. And it impacts young people so much. They have to move around. They have to constantly worry about if they're going to get woke up or not enough rest or not enough to eat or something in that area just because this society has, majority of it says, oh, this is negative and we need to get it out. It's a danger to our community when it's really only people trying to survive in their community and they don't even see that.
Yeah, I've seen this firsthand. A couple of springs ago, I went during my final year of college on an alternative spring break to San Francisco. And one of the main things that we had to do for this alternative break trip, it's not only provide some direct relief, some temporary relief to these people. And don't get me wrong, I think that it's important that they receive any relief that they could get for the time being. For example, we prepared meals for them, we provided some harm reduction kits for them. But in addition to that, it was our job to examine the causes of homelessness in the Tenderloin district in San Francisco, which is known for being a high crime homeless district. And one of the things that I saw while at the Tenderloin in San Francisco was law enforcement conducting sweeps. So basically what a sweep is, law enforcement just picks up if you're experiencing homelessness, once again, people experiencing homelessness rather than homeless people. If you are experiencing homelessness and law enforcement conducts a sweep, they basically just throw around your belongings to a different place, even if you're sleeping, and they just eject you from that particular area and force you to move. And it's absolutely repulsive and dehumanizing what law enforcement has done to those people during sweeps. And I saw so many of them while at the Tenderloin in San Francisco. And there was this one lady who even had not only her supply of water, but also her pets were physically moved to a different area. Her one source, her one source of comfort. And I could go on and on about how sad it is, but it just goes to show how little regard we have for other humans and how little we view these people who are experiencing homelessness, and we try to make them live even worse lives. Now, I'm not trying to make them live even worse lives. I'm talking about we as a society by conducting these sweeps and enforcing these bans, we're trying to make them live even worse lives than they would have.
So, going off of what you guys have said, how does that handle mentally? for anybody in that situation. I would honestly ask Savannah to see where you would take this because it's a lot mental heartstrings that are pulling right now and it's saddening. So what would you say about this situation and how you experienced it?
It is very sad. I was never sad in the situation. I was always very like exhausted, very tired, very confused, Every time someone would say, "Move on, go to somewhere else, go to somewhere else." Well, once you go to somewhere else, that somewhere else tells you to go to somewhere else. If you guys ever heard of the term move along where to, that's exactly what that means because it's a very chain reaction event. Once you get moved, you're in a different place. And then sometimes you even get stigmatized as a criminal when you're really not, or when you really are. People that commit crimes that are experiencing homelessness are just trying to survive because if you're stealing food, that means you're hungry. If you're stealing things of value, that means you're probably trying to get a motel to stay warm for the night if it's winter. If you're doing criminal acts of that sort, where it's the things that are making you survive in a criminal activity way, then it's a push and pull against society's stigmas because then if you are doing criminal activity while experiencing homelessness, you're just proving that right as people with experiencing homelessness are criminals. Like you're kind of just backing that stigma up when, you know, people are doing that. And it's sad to say that as a society, we don't pull together and, say maybe don't have these bans and laws. Like who made these? I was wondering all this time, like who made this law to just pick up like people that are experiencing homelessness just to say, well, move along. And then where else? Where else? It's always where else, no matter where you go, because I've been in 26 different states. There's bans across the states where you can't even dig through the trash if you're hungry. And that's just insane to me. If you're not sprawling all the trash everywhere, if you're not harming nobody, then what is the harm? You're literally showing people that you're willing to eat out of something so gross because no one else is willing to help you.
A lot of things that I like notice when it comes to people experiencing homelessness is the fact that we have so many like things that we can create better solutions for, and we refuse to. I don't know how many times that I've seen on social media, going through Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, you name it. They will be like, hey, why don't we plant fruit trees in downtown or anybody's downtown so everybody can have free access to food? But people are so greedy that it's one of those situations where it's just like they will choose greed over somebody being completely, fulfilled in not hungry, and then the other thing that really just boils my blood is seeing restaurants completely trash everything that they had throughout the day and just throw it in the trash. Like, why couldn't you have simply gave that to somebody experiencing homelessness? Or if somebody's kind of straggling along in the restaurant, be like, hey, we have leftovers. Do you want XYZ? You know, it's as simple as asking a question and having a heart. Why are we not having that conversation? It's like, it's money over morals, and that's the situation that bothers me because it's like, why is it that you see a money opportunity, but you don't morally see like this person needs water, this person needs food. Me, every time that I see somebody home, like a person experiencing homelessness, if I have like a snack or something like that and I'm not gonna finish it, I will give it to that person experiencing homelessness. Or if I got an extra water bottle, I will hand that out. Like you have options to help these people out, even with the littlest things, but you guys choose not to, you know? So
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with you. And well, I'm going to keep on the topic of, you know, how we as people know what can help people experiencing homelessness, yet we just choose not to provide that help. It's not just, for example, restaurants discarding food that would have been better off being used to feed those experiencing homelessness. I'm also talking systemically as well. So, for example, during my earlier interview, I said that I served as a volunteer in service to America within the state of Oregon. And the city that I served in, Eugene, Oregon, has this program called Cahoots, which is a crisis and intervention program that uses social workers rather than police officers to interact with those who might be mentally ill or intoxicated. And of course, those groups of people experiencing mental illness or are experiencing intoxication might be experiencing homelessness as well. And what that what that program has done in the city of Eugene, Oregon, it has reduced the number of interactions that have resulted in injury or even death. I shouldn't say that. I should say murder to homelessness, to those experiencing homelessness. It has reduced those incidences by having social workers interact with those people that are experiencing intoxication or those that are mentally ill. Why do I bring this up? It's because we know of solutions. We know what we could do to help these people. We just don't really choose to.
Another thing that is also like a thing that kind of grinds my gears, the thing that butters my biscuit is the fact that like rent, like you were mentioning previous to, rent is constantly going up, and it's just like, how hard is it for our entire society to be like, okay, rent's too high. Why don't we bunk this down so people can have homes? So people can get off the streets, like constantly having so many solutions, but not willing to take the steps to do it because of greed, because of, well, I'm in a better situation and I pulled up myself up by my bootstraps and got myself together. Not everybody is mentally prepared for that, And so when you expect somebody to do the things that you have done, it's crazy. And I would like to give advice to people that are, living their best lives and stuff like that and judging these people that are experiencing homelessness. You have never been in their shoes. You have never been in their position. And if you have, then you should understand that your experiences do not correlate to theirs. Everybody has individual maps that they are going through. And the fact that you are trying to compare your map to their map is highly just disrespectful because it's just like you don't know what they went through and they don't know what you went through, but there is a common ground where you can have the situation of understanding. So that's what I have to say about that. I'm gonna hop off my soapbox here.
So, Savannah, you discussed your story experiencing homelessness in earlier podcasts. And going off of that note, I'm just curious what advice you might have for those youth that are currently not necessarily experiencing homelessness, although they could be. What advice would you have to those youth that are experiencing the brunt of trying to their hardest to live a sustainable life, yet societal barriers are preventing them from doing so?
Yeah, my advice would be just to never give up. Never give up hope. Always seek out the good in people, even if they're bad. Maybe just say, oh, they said I was some kind of stigma today. Maybe they're just having a bad day. So it doesn't eat you alive inside because it will. If you experienced homelessness like me throughout the whole years of like 9, 10 years, you're off and on with your family your whole life, you're gonna feel the stigma inside of you that's gonna eat you up. Prove to society that you're not that. You're not society, like you're not what society says you are. And you're not a label, you're not a number, you're not somebody's ticket to, their job as a check, as like a therapist or something like that, when they view you as, oh, this person's never going to have help. I've had therapists said that, like, then, this lady is never going to make it nowhere. Prove them wrong. For sure. Prove them wrong.
That was a very beautiful way of saying what you were giving advice to. And like you said, going off of never giving up, always advocate for yourself and always push that what it is that you need for yourself. Never back down from it. Do not corner yourself with that situation. Always fight back for what it is that you need. Because at some point they are going to back down and do what it is that you need to do. So keep pushing and doing what it is that you need to do.
We'd like to thank you all for listening to today's episode. We really hope you enjoyed the content. Please stay tuned for Savannah's presentation to the YHDP, or the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project.
Hi, I'm Savannah Gregory. I'm here to talk about harm reduction from a youth's point of view. And what is harm reduction to you all? So there's many substances in rural and other big city areas, and there's many local resources that offer the types of harm reduction. Can anyone tell us what harm reduction means to you, or what it is to you in your area? Yes, it's safer alternatives for substances such as meth, heroin, stuff like that. Fentanyl is really bad in Boulder. So can anyone name of some of the harm reduction items any of your area like gives out for young people, such as drug test kits, Narcan, stuff like that? Also, drop-in centers and outreach programs usually have these items. It's so important to have these because I myself have seen so many overdoses between different things, far and in between. I've also have had a couple of friends this past 5 years that have used substances to commit suicide. So that's another big thing. It's probably right up there with substance use. The worst thing you can do for youth is just tell them to quit. That it's just easy and you can go into this program and you have to be clean, and that's just it. It is not that easy. Let me tell you. This is why holding recovery trainings and harm reduction trainings at your sites, at your programs is so beneficial to the youth. They will have someone either to connect or to tell what is happening, what they need, to outreach and have that extended arm for them to have help and support through this addiction era. Programs also need to have wraparound services such as counseling, peer support, and able to know how to deal with a crisis correctly. At my site, they were sending about 10 to 20 police officers for anything, any situation. They were just like, oh, we need the police over here now, not EMTs, not a special intern like police where they specialize in substances. That has changed over the 3 years that I lived there and then now have worked there. They have a special team that comes out and handles any type of crisis with substances or without substances. I myself have seen so much negative events and trauma with substances. I will be discussing my earliest memory witnessing substance abuse when I was 3 years old. My mom, she was taking psychotic medications and alcohol when I was little, and she would lie to the case manager and say, no, I'm sober, off of alcohol, everything. I remember this when I was yay high, and one day she just fell unconscious in the kitchen. Me, being 3 years old, thought she was sleeping, because what do you even know when you're 3? She fell unconscious, and I thought she was asleep. It was about, I want to say 12 hours, because I remember in the morning it was sunlight, and then she woke up at nighttime. Who knows how long that was. And even though there was a caseworker that checked on us in our house every week, my mom just still lied and said she was not using alcohol, just taking her psychotic medicine for her bipolar and schizophrenia. And my question is, why has the system failed me throughout my whole entire life? As a result to all of this trauma, PTSD, manic depression, and schizoaffective disorder. So if you guys remember what I said about the whole cycle of how a young child doesn't have stability in their life, that was me. That was basically what I went through. I was emancipated at 14 because my mom actually came at me with a steak knife trying to harm me. So that's it.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope it helps. Yeah, is there anything that you want to consider as like you build your planning about like, throw in some harm reduction plans in your programs? That would be nice. Yeah, as I look back, on that event, I feel like there could have been more things done, more house calls, more house check-ins, maybe even like testing her alcohol level somehow, like throughout the week, because she was just drinking and like popping pills. And she was just like, oh yeah, at the meeting she was like, yeah, I'm sober, I don't do alcohol. So it's kind of like, it's hard to have a manipulative parent with a child when she can just put on like a fake face and be like, oh yeah, everything's fine, when everything's really not fine. And then when you're so young, how do you ask for help?
Let's call it.
Yeah, and it's hard when it's your mom and that's like the only guardian you have, and then she tells you, don't tell on me, don't say anything. And you're like, and then she tells you, they're going to take you away, you're going to be put in a bad place and all this stuff. When you're little, you're growing up and it's like, well, I don't want to be in a bad place, but this is kind of bad too. But I don't know what the other place, the other bad place is. It's probably going to be foster care, and I was probably going to have a good life. And mind you, this was in Tennessee. This was not in Colorado. So it's a lot of other places are way worse than Colorado. Yeah, there was a point where when she started using services for a psychiatrist, she said she would self-medicate with alcohol. And that's probably like the worst thing you could ever do. Because after a while, your liver starts hurting, you start getting skinnier, you don't eat, like it's horrible. So like your body just keeps getting dependent on that substance. And then like you're not even the same person as what you were. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, you're welcome.